Hello, and welcome to another Datadog security webinar. I'm Andrew Krug, and I lead the security advocacy team here at Datadog. Today, I'm joined by a host of great guests who are going to tell you about some exciting new features. We'll get a look into the different research that we're doing at Datadog, attacks and threats we're seeing in the wild, and we'll also have an interview with a special customer CISO. Coming up shortly, we'll kind of close things out with a roadmap session where you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So again, bring those questions in the Q&A feature in the Zoom chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. If we don't have time to answer your question today, we will of course follow up with you via email after this event is over. And once again, thanks for being here. Shortly, in just minutes, I'll be joined by Zach Allen, Senior Director of Security Research here at Datadog. We're going to bring him on and do just a quick look at how we differentiate all of these different things that we're detecting inside of the Datadog platform.
Sure. So my name is Zach Allen. I'm the Senior Director of Security Research and Detection Engineering here at Datadog. I've been here since about the inception of our security products, and Datadog has taken a pretty unique approach to building our security products where they've built a research team alongside the products. And our number one goal as a research team is to make sure that as the threat and vulnerability landscape evolves, there's a team of researchers and detection engineers and just essentially hackers making sure that we can track what's going on and build content like rules and other Datadog things to make sure that our customers are the most up to date with their products as possible.
Thanks. I know that we have a number of products now, and we detect a ton of different things across that product suite. In fact, the title of this special webinar is Threats, Attacks, and Vulnerabilities. Could you just break down a little bit for us about how we're kind of thinking about what is a threat versus an attack versus a vulnerability?
Yes, this is a great question. So when you think of threats and vulnerabilities in like the traditional security sense, you can think of a vulnerability as an unlocked door, and a threat is somebody who wants to go and exploit that unlocked door. The key differentiator here is the attacks portion is the actual event itself. So one threat or many threats kind of opening that door is a single attack itself. And so what's nice about differentiating it like that is we can start to build rules and we can build detections in ways to catch multiple attacks from multiple threats. And so it allows us to basically scale our rules much easier and make sure our customers can take advantage of that scale.
Great, and we're thinking about that across the different layers of the application stack. So can we just kind of step through those layers for the folks that maybe have never heard it framed that way?
Sure. Yeah. So Datadog, very cloud focused, and so a lot of our customers. And so when we think of the application layer stack, we generally put it into three buckets. The code that's running the application and all the systems associated with that. So think of CI/CD, developer laptops, build systems, deployment pipelines, everything you can think of there, to the code running itself on your production systems. The runtime is really looking at the infrastructure associated with running that code. And so as that application is live and it's running on a container in a Kubernetes cluster, or it's running bare metal somewhere else on a virtual machine, you can go and inspect the runtime and make sure you can look for interesting changes, so to speak, maybe attackers taking advantage of it. The last part is the cloud itself. And so the cloud involves everything from the infrastructure to the different services that the cloud service providers provide. And so you can think of this as storage buckets, the virtual machines themselves, or even the control plane layer, like somebody logging into the console on one of your cloud providers and making changes to your cloud. We want to make sure we can look at those changes and just make sure that they're authorized to be made, or if we're aware of a threat performing those types of attacks on these different cloud control planes, we can catch that too.
Great. So this is a unique webinar in that we're going to have a special CISO guest here in just a bit. I'm wondering personally, from your experience, just like looking at all these different environments, what advice do you have for the folks that are maybe watching for the first time on how to get started running a program across all these different layers and sort of managing all of that surface area?
I would say visibility is probably the most important thing to start with. You can't really protect what you can't see. And so when you have a technology stack that's either cloud first or even cloud hybrid, you can really take advantage of the visibility it offers you. So whether you're using a product like Datadog or you're dipping into different log streams on these different cloud providers, get that visibility first, and then you can start prioritizing how you want to either protect those assets or detect threats on them. So without visibility, there is no security, is what I'm saying.
I would 100% agree that we start detecting from that very firm foundation of observing all the things and then kind of zeroing in on what's important, which is kind of a nice segue to what we're going to talk about next here, which is what are we actually seeing across all these customer environments? You kind of have a unique position in that we have this team built out and you're able to look at all of these different real world environments. So what are kind of some of the trends?
So if I had to give an overall trend, I would say the cost of speed in these environments is security. Now let me explain that a little bit more. Basically, when you're trying to scale as fast as you can with cloud technology, there's a reason why Wall Street calls them hyperscalers. They're called hyperscalers is because they're launching services, they're launching different features at a really rapid pace. I think each of the major three cloud service provider boasts over 200 services per cloud provider. That's between Amazon, that's between Azure, and that's between GCP. And so if you want to build applications quickly, what happens is you tend to not think about security at the forefront, which is totally fine because a lot of folks need to kind of get things off the ground before they can really start looking at all the different ways they can secure what they need to secure. And so what we're seeing is threat actors taking advantage of this speed and either leveraging age-old techniques to attack these environments and these customer environments, or they're really paying attention to what the industry is doing, and they're seeing how they can abuse services along that industry. I think a great example is AI. We're starting to see a lot more things associated with threats against AI and AI models, and that's going hand in hand with the evolutions of that field itself.
And we're also seeing an uptick in new takes on old attacks. And I think one of the most interesting areas there is actually cloud ransoms right now, where back in the good old days, somebody just downloaded an executable, they double clicked it, and maybe went through with software and encrypted a bunch of files. But we're seeing that a little bit different on the cloud side, right?
We're definitely seeing it differently because cloud, it's very good when it comes to backups. There's no concept of it running an executable and encrypting your files on something like a file system. Attackers are getting more creative. And what they've done is they've realized that there's two things that are very interesting from a um, kind of like a cyber criminal perspective when ransomwaring in the cloud. That's your intellectual property, so that includes your code, that includes the secrets that you're storing there, but it's also your customer list. And so let's just say you're running a SaaS app that has integrations with all of your customers. Attackers want to use that in a supply chain threats perspective to pivot into customer environments. And so when they perform this exfiltration, you'll notice that a lot of these recent cloud breaches focus on intellectual property theft, as well as customers of that firm being breached also being at risk because secrets were stolen, personally identifiable information was stolen, and so it's kind of like a really good one-two punch.
I would agree that that's a good analogy there. Um, could you talk a little bit, ransomware aside, about how we scale out inside Datadog and how you think about that security research team that we have really, kind of like driving really useful detections across all these different layers for the different types of threats and attacks that you're seeing.
Yeah, so the way we scale is very similar to how Datadog has its observability products, code, runtime, and cloud. And all we're doing is we're applying a security lens over each one of those pieces of observability context. And so what's really nice about that is we already have kind of like that quote unquote data lake over everything like your telemetry that the customers are generating. But now we're just applying our own logic on top of that to do threat and vulnerability detection on top of those three things. And so that's one way we kind of cut into, I would say, the cloud telemetry game. What makes us unique is that we're seeing things that a lot of other firms just aren't able to see because they haven't approached it from an observability problem. We're able to really dive deep into the runtime context, for example, to find things like SQL injections. We're able to look at the code that's getting into your CI/CD pipeline and checking that for vulnerabilities or checking that for malware before it reaches your production pipeline. And so with that kind of observability context, we're able to kind of split between those three things. Now, the way we kind of approach this is we have a threats and a vulnerabilities kind of side to everything. And so our threats team really dives deep and makes sure they can build rules that are scalable, that finds what we mentioned earlier, attacks. Attacks in the cloud, you kind of see them over and over again and they repeat themselves, and these techniques are tried and true. And so by detecting the technique within an attack, it's easy for us to catch a threat no matter where it's coming from. And so that's one advantage we have to kind of scale this out. On the vulnerability side, we kind of split that into two buckets. One, your traditional CVE style vulnerability detection, where we can look at a number of ways to go and get the library versions and the package versions on your infrastructure and kind of ship an SBOM to Datadog to do vulnerability detection of those CVEs. I think the more interesting parts are in the misconfiguration and identity space. We spend a lot of time looking at these hyperscalers and seeing how they're configured out of the box and seeing how customers are configuring them. And we're throwing a lot of resources behind making sure we can attack those configurations to see if there's something exploitable in there. If there is, we'll release a rule or a set of rules so you can protect yourselves from those misconfigurations. Lastly, identity. It's probably one of the hardest things in the cloud, identity and access management. There are really complicated identity models that serve a really important purpose for cloud environments. But it basically requires somebody working on it full time to understand all the different ways you can leverage an identity to escalate privileges, to move across an account boundary, or really to just kind of abuse something that shouldn't have the amount of access it should have. And so that's kind of like how we split everything up here on research between those threats and vulnerabilities.
Thanks for that. I always like to say the most dangerous thing about risky identity management is that it works.
It's a good one. I'm going to steal that one.
You're more than welcome to. Anyways, thanks for being here again today, and like obviously Zach will be here at the end of the session to answer any questions that you have about our security research program, detection engineering, etc. And with that, next up, you're going to hear a little bit about some brand new features in Datadog Cloud Security Management.
Thank you. My name is Daniel, and I'm a product manager here at Datadog, working on our application security products. As we just saw, the cloud deployment model allows you to quickly reach a scale, and we love that. However, we have learned that orgs have trouble keeping up with the cloud security posture. Now here at Datadog, we have been working on this problem for a while, and I'm very excited to show you a couple of things that will help you close the gap. Cool. Let me start with some context about the current cloud security realities we see in our customers. First, we see that customers very often rely on large cloud deployments that combine multiple cloud vendors and application frameworks. This can include 100% cloud or hybrid deployments. And on top of that, we see customers that combine multiple cloud vendors. Second, we see that customers have many resources without any monitoring or supervision. This could include VMs, databases, storage buckets, even identities. We see a lack of standardization in terms of telemetry and monitoring. Third, sadly, very often, security is an afterthought. Teams are under a lot of pressure to keep up with capabilities, and there is not enough time to secure what you build. And last, what we mean with unclear damage radius is that teams have no clear understanding of the true severity and impact of a particular vulnerability or misconfiguration. Okay, so it's a complex problem. But why is the security industry failing to help cloud native companies secure the deployments? Well, we see a few reasons. First, most tools have complicated onboarding processes. Some of them require agents, other new dashboards and workflows. After onboarding, we also see that teams need to wait a long time before seeing tangible value. This is usually because of slow scans. Also, often teams need security experts, or the remediation is a very manual process. Then we have a very long backlog of problems to solve. We see that most vendors fail to help customers cut through the noise because they lack a solid way to rank and prioritize the problems. Even worse, the triage often requires security experts to investigate and prioritize, which increases the remediation time and the exposure window. Lastly, teams do not want to have a collection of disparate point solutions with noise integration. We see that most solutions lack single pane of glass during investigation. Okay, so what are we doing about this? Today I want to highlight 3 things. First, agentless onboarding is now available. This means that teams can now onboard easily and start securing the cloud environments in minutes. Then when you're ready, you can enrich the findings by incorporating insights from the Datadog agent. After onboarding, we are able to quickly generate results and apply prioritization to cut through long backlogs. Lastly, not all resources such as databases, VMs, IAM accounts in your deployment have the same damage potential. We want to help you uncover who can do what to what resources. Cool, let me show you all this in a quick demo that shows how we help you onboard in minutes, not days or hours, scan your entire cloud infra in minutes, and investigate the problems, and of course, remediate and fix the problem. Starting with Datadog Cloud Security is easier than ever. We are happy to announce that you can now onboard directly from our website. There is no need to install any agents or enter any credit card numbers. After filling a quick form, you will be able to enable the capabilities you need to begin securing your cloud environment. This includes misconfigurations in your account, identity risks, vulnerabilities in your host and containers, and cloud configuration resources. As you see, connecting to your environment is very easy. Simply plug your AWS account so that Datadog can review the configuration and the resources associated to the account. And that's it. After a few minutes, the Datadog security inbox will surface the most important findings for you to review. The cool thing about Inbox is that it aggregates and combines results, including cloud misconfigurations, identity risks, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and even attack paths. Teams can also focus the visibility on their own scope, or even focus on a single service at a time. Okay, let's take a look at some misconfigurations that we are able to obtain directly from the agentless onboarding. Okay, so here we have a publicly accessible EC2 instance. Here you see a visual representation of the access paths, the impacted resource at risk, and the blast radius of the problem. You see, this is real-time information to help you understand the true relevance of the issue in the context of your own deployment. In particular, the severity breakdown section is telling us that the resource has a public IP address, which of course increases the severity of the problem. Okay, so let's remediate this issue. Clicking on the remediation section, we surface instructions on how to fix this problem. In this case, we are able to provide 2 paths to fix the problem. Here, we're able to help you fix the issue in one click, easily directly in the exact point of your AWS configuration. But in this case, we are also able to point at the infrastructure as code resource, such as Terraform script, that is the true root of the problem. So you can edit the script and commit the changes. Cool. As a recap, we went through our easy onboarding process to help you start securing your cloud environment in minutes. We looked into how to understand the true damage potential of a cloud misconfiguration. And in sum, we help you accelerate the remediation process. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that exciting demo. And now to our next segment. All right, for our customer spotlight, we are joined today by Ami Dave from Fanatics. Thanks for being here with us, Ami.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to tell us just a little bit about Fanatics as a company, what it is that Fanatics does, and also who are you at Fanatics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with who am I? So my name is Ami Dave. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Fanatics Betting and Gaming. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, and my main responsibilities are overseeing the information security team and program. Fanatics is a sports technology company. We provide fans a one-stop shop for all things that they love. So whether that be merchandise, your favorite jerseys, to using our sports betting platform to place a bet on your favorite team, or buying a collector's item for your sports team. So we have built a sports technology company that focuses on the fan and the ecosystem.
Very cool. What I just heard in that very simple statement was potentially lots of legislation and compliance that is directly related and very impactful for your work. So could you just talk a little bit about how regulated that industry is? Obviously, everybody is very familiar with traditional e-commerce, but I bet there's more layers to creating an online betting platform.
Absolutely. So for sports betting, we're very regulated. And I say that because every operator in this space that provides betting and gaming services, whether it be online, casino, sports books, they all must obtain a license from these regulatory bodies. Um, these licenses are granted on a strict criteria, and that criteria covers multiple areas, whether that's financial stability of the company, the fairness of the game, um, responsible gaming practices, compliance audits, security audits, and assessments. Those are those main areas of focus. But in addition to that, all of the vendors that we work with, operators must have a a strict licensing requirement that they must obtain. So if you think about all the operators and the vendors that they use, they go through heavy diligence when it comes to reviewing the vendor and making sure that they can obtain this license as well. So it's all encompassing. There are many areas where uh, we must be able to meet these regulatory requirements.
So, given all those regulations, like obviously some of them are not necessarily attestable with software and some of them are, how does observability tooling and security through observability help you solve some of those problems?
That's a great question. Um, Observability definitely plays a crucial role in bridging just engineering and security together. And I would say there are three main areas of focus. One, it's shared visibility. Two, it's having a collaborative approach. And then three, it's getting that data and actioning on those insights. Um, so where all start is the visibility piece of it, observability, if you would say. So for us, it's crucial because we have our logs, we have signals and metrics, right? And we care about that in our environment. So having that observability for both engineering and security allows us to look at the same data and look at where we need areas of opportunity and alignment, right? To move that ahead. Um, I'll go with I'll then segue into collaboration. With engineering and security, we're focused on creating dashboards, alerts, and through that, analytics. With that, it gives us a sense of how can we action on an alert, really identify what that root cause is, and then troubleshoot it. And the last piece I'm going to touch on is the detection. We use observability to identify issues. And through that, we're able to understand where our system failures are, where can we optimize performance, where are those suspicious and anomalous issues, right? And we use this to understand how can we get better with tweaking or tuning that detection, which encourages my security team to be more proactive in their response. Um, so I would say those three main areas really do help in observability, but there's so many other areas of focus that I believe we use Datadog to help us. One of which is where we're really trying to shift left in our security practices. And there's a number of things that we do in order to uh, get there. One of the main services that we use with Datadog is the service catalog. Um, and I know that we're still on an early phase of our journey as we're maturing our program and shifting left. But I would say that utilizing the service catalog helps our organization have an inventory of our services, right? And in knowing that, we are better positioned for us to threat model, pen test, apply any other security best practices that would help us along that journey. But I do understand that having a service catalog and a functioning one that really maps to those services uh, is a journey that needs a lot of collaboration and focus. And I will say that, talking to my peers, that is also an issue that they come across is how do you get an inventory of those services and make sure that you're using that data to help you along in your engineering or security journey. So I do believe that it's a struggle for many and one that we are very focused on solving and making sure that we're maturing our program overall.
I would just touch on one thing that you said there, which is that you're early in your service catalog and security journey. I think almost every person I talk to says that they're early when actually they're quite far along. So don't sell it short, when you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah,
The
that's a,
work
that's
is never done.
That's a good point. I think there's always room for improvement and where we need to be. So it's a good call out. And I do want to mention, yes, my team and along with the engineering teams have put a lot of focus in our service catalog, but there's definitely room to improve, and we'll get there eventually.
It's actually quite interesting how we've come full circle on the inventory thing, because I feel like when I started my career, most technology problems were inventory problems, but we had to go around with like clipboards in a data center, and pull asset tags and things. And now you can just get that information. And it's become especially relevant in the conversation about vulnerabilities. And that's a big part of what we're talking about in this webinar is not just threats, but also the software side of things. So can you talk a little bit about, how that inventory helps you when you see a CVE or a post on Datadog Security Labs drop for a new vulnerability?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I want to say that we use a suite of tools with Datadog, cloud security posture management, application security management, sensitive Datadog scanning, and all of which help us identify vulnerabilities in our environment. And in doing so, with the vulnerabilities, having that service catalog, we know exactly who the service owner is, what the severity of that vulnerability is, and what is the remediation that it would take to mitigate that. So it helps us in our journey of shifting left, but more so that capability of having the service catalog really pinpoints all of the data you need to mitigate the issue. So it's helped us thus far. And we're improving as we go.
Very cool. So would you say that given that you have two different lenses of data, that helps you to know when it's an all hands on deck kind of situation versus, when maybe this just goes in the backlog somewhere in terms of how you triage those things?
Yeah, and I will say that using the suite of what Datadog offers, having that present, the data there helps us action just that. So we're able to quickly know if this is all hands on deck, or does this only require specific domains within my team, right? Whether that's security operations and engineering, or if that's application security, we're quickly able to identify who's involved and who is needed to triage the issue.
Great. And after that's all over, do you do any kind of retrospective on these things? So I know that that's one of the things that was really prevalent in operations teams, but maybe not necessarily in security teams.
Yes, absolutely. We do a corrections of errors. So we do that after every incident, and we look for areas of opportunity of what went well, what didn't go well, um, what can we do better? Are there any other additional areas we need to focus on? But we focus on the problem statement. We go through multiple steps, and we do that by collaboration. Not only does my team lead that, but other engineering teams lead that, and it always leads to a great outcome, right? Because when we find these things, we want to get better, and having that positive attitude really does help when conducting a COE in our environment.
Awesome. So we're just about out of time here, but before we wrap up, do you have any one piece of advice that you would give to other leaders, maybe watching this webinar or this piece of content afterwards for just like where to start?
Yeah, I would say get familiar with the tools that you use and how effective they are. Um, with that, I would say that you'll find that there are areas of opportunity for efficiencies, and there are areas where your teams can collaborate better. But that all comes down to the tools that you have, the people that you have, and the process that you have. So I would say keep looking at that, observing that, and evaluating, is it truly meeting your needs?
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here with me today and sharing just a little bit about how Fanatics thinks about these problems.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear a little bit about some brand new product features in the ASM family. So I will hand it off to Nakul now.
Hi, I'm Nakul Venkatesh, a product manager at Datadog. Today, I'd like to walk you through a cool new feature in the Datadog application security management product called exploit prevention. But first, let's look at some of the challenges with web application protection. Modern applications are dynamic and constantly evolving, with new vulnerabilities being introduced into production every day. Perimeter-based protection, such as web application firewalls or WAFs, are built to defend the application as a static entity and can't easily adapt to such changes without manual tuning and configuration. As a result, application security becomes a whack-a-mole game for security teams. While WAFs are a necessary component of web security, serving as the first line of defense at the application layer, their role is primarily focused on signature-based detection, which is effective against well-known attack vectors. Their effectiveness diminishes against novel exploits and evasive techniques that can bypass signature-based defenses. This is where Datadog Application Security Management, or ASM, comes in. While WAFs operate primarily on known patterns, ASM leverages Datadog's observability data to detect application-level anomalies and identify suspicious activities. ASM can block vulnerability exploits even when no specific signature is available. Let's dive into the details. Based on the Runtime Application Self-Protection, or RASP technology, exploit prevention protects your applications by blocking attacks that target known or hidden vulnerabilities in your application. It prevents unauthorized access to sensitive areas like your databases and file systems. This is possible as the Datadog tracing library is embedded in your application and observes its behavior in real time, tracking inputs and outputs, user interactions, and data flow. It focuses on critical elements like data validation, authentication, and database interactions, identifying abnormal patterns. For instance, in case of a SQL injection attempt, we don't just look for unsanitized input, but also look for how it modifies the structure and execution of SQL queries before declaring it as an exploit. Let's look at an example. When receiving a HTTP request, the in-app WAF, which is part of the embedded Datadog tracing library, will first analyze the content of the request parameters. Later, during code execution on the server, the tracer will monitor the database access and its specific request. Even though the request parameter iClover was used in the database query, the exploit prevention heuristic will not consider that access to be suspicious and nothing will be done. This is because user input is treated as data and not part of the SQL command itself. Let's look at another example. In this case, the HTTP request modified the semantics of the SQL command. User input is not treated as data and instead added to the SQL command, resulting in an exploit attempt which gets blocked. Now, let's dive into a quick demo. Here, I have a peer testing application that is running locally on my computer. This appears as the vulnerable web application service in the Datadog UI. Let me go ahead and trigger a local file inclusion exploit attempt. Now, when I navigate to ASM Trace Explorer, I can see that ASM detected the exploit attempt. There was an OS file access attempt for /etc/password, and there was a 200 OK response served. This is because the service itself, the vulnerable web application service, is associated with the policy where all the rules are in monitoring only. Let's go ahead and change that. I'm going to filter by all the vulnerability exploit rules. I'm going to set the local file inclusion exploit to blocking. Now, let's go back to the application and trigger the LFI exploit one more time. As you can see, ASM blocked this exploit attempt. Next, let's navigate to the ASM Trace Explorer where you can see that the blocked trace is showing up. It is important to note that we didn't block based on the presence of /etc/password in the URL, but rather we looked for was the local file being accessed before making the decision to block. You can also see that stack trace and the exact location of where the vulnerability can be found. So I can quickly navigate to GitHub and look at line number 93 where the vulnerability is present. Wrapping up, with exploit prevention, you can block attacks against vulnerabilities that have not yet been remediated. As the Datadog tracer tracks application behavior, you get an accurate answer on whether the exploit reached its intended target or not. You can get information such as files accessed, queries executed, and stack trace that helps your AppSec teams coordinate with dev and ops teams for faster remediation. Note that it is an included feature for all ASM customers and can be turned on at no additional cost. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this special edition security webinar. We'll go now live to Q&A, where we'll answer any of the questions that you put in that Zoom Q&A during the session. If you have a question, get it in there, and if we don't have time to answer, we will get back to you via email after the event is over. Thanks so much for being here.